Welcome to the Fitness Queens podcast, empowering your mind and sculpting your body. Join your hosts, multiple fitness world champions, Alicia Kyrgios and Stephanie McHugh, as we explore all things female health, training, competing, mindset, and living the fitness life every day.
So welcome everybody to the latest edition of We Fitness Queens, and I'm super excited today, not only because this is the first time I got to see her gorgeous face in quite a while. We've had a bit of a hiatus.
Hello everyone, so good to see you, Ali.
Always. But also because we've had, so much go down for both of us since we got on last. And for anyone that's been following mine, I'm so sorry in advance for still sounding sick. We've had an entirely sick household for the last week. It's been a mission. But B, I have been combating and nursing, for a better word, since probably, I think I spoke to Steph about this offline while I was still pregnant, the shoulder issue that I was having. Anyway, it really came to a head and I got diagnosed with bursitis in the last sort of 8 weeks. And it's been an absolute nightmare. Like, I couldn't sleep at night because of the pain. And I'm in this situation where I'm going, okay, crap, I've really got to try to be in a position to grow back these 3 kilos of lost mass as quickly as possible. Because anyone listening to this, you think, okay, you're not on stage till the end of 2025. That's a long time. It's not a long time, Steph, is it? It's really
no. It's actually quite overwhelming. That's actually one of the things that we're going to talk about today, because we feel like we're so behind in this building thing.
Exactly.
And it's because of injuries. Like, my body is broken. I talk about this on my stories anytime I do pop on, when I randomly appear. It's really because I've been working behind the scenes on all the injuries and honestly working through. It's a little weird, right, Alice? It's definitely uncharted territory that I'm just still not used to.
Yeah. Whereas, I guess rehab has been in and out of my life for a long time, especially since my
only my life now.
Yeah, I know. It's a shit show, but there's also some really great outcomes from going down the rabbit hole and the journey of rehab. And I always lean into it and embrace everything I can take out of it. And hence today's guest, which I was super excited to bring on, because when I first met Nick, sort of take us back 6 weeks ago, I was sort of 2 weeks in the trenches. I was getting treatment 2-3 times a day from my physio team and my chiropractor team, my osteo team. And, that was like quite trying to fix the wound and trying to put a Band-Aid on things initially. And I'm sitting here going, okay, but there's this gap that I've got, which is, all right, when I start feeling a little bit better and a little bit less in pain, how then do I translate that to being able to load again, right? And there was this big gap. Anyway, Nick was working with a couple of my athletes. We share a couple of athletes, and I was pretty impressed with the work that he was doing with them and the outcomes that they were achieving personally. So I had this window of like literally 3 hours. He's down the Gold Coast, I'm in Brisbane, and I sent him a message on Insta and I'm like, yo, Nick, you work with a few of my athletes. I know of you. You probably know of me, but this is my situation, and I need to meet you. And I'm like, and I'm going to be on the Gold Coast tomorrow between these hours only. And the cool dude that he is, and I just absolutely, the minute I met him, went, yeah, I like you. You're going to be one of my people. He sends me this screenshot, and this is just indicative of Nick. Sends me this screenshot, and it's literally his calendar. And he's like, yeah, absolutely, I can see you here. And do you know what the irony was? I hadn't even sent this kid my bloody times that I was available, and it was the exact opening in his diary. And I was like, boom, meant to be. Yeah, in that. So here I am. I roll in, and I remember thinking to myself, okay, this is what the guy's going to do, because I'm thinking about past experiences, right? And I'm thinking he's gonna sit down, listen to my story, and then he's gonna be like, yep, okay, no worries, I can help you. And then he's gonna like literally turn me around. I'll be in and out in 30 minutes, maybe 45, and I'll have a program, and that'll be it. Nah, I spent the whole 2 hours with the guy. He assessed everything, but he was pretty nuanced too. Like, he picked up on a couple of things I hadn't even talked to him about. So with no further ado, I will get Nick to speak in a second, but I wanted this bit of an intro because I think the guy really deserves it. He's very, very good. But he literally looked at me head to toe and picked out things I hadn't mentioned and went, right, well, now get up on the table. I've got to like actually treat you and get you into a position. And then he took me through all these things that I later learned would be on my program that are
Didn't that lovely?
these deep level of stretches. And
I already like the guy. I haven't even met him yet, but I already like him.
he was really good. And I walked away and was like, wow, like I feel confident that he's actually going to be the bridge to the gap that I needed. And more importantly, I think even more than what I thought I needed. So with no further ado, this is the guy that I think I'm going to refer to forevermore as the rehab to actual effective design guy, because that is really what he does. And I should say, AKA Mr. fucking stretch, trigger, control, and mobility guy, because he's all
Let's roll out the red carpet now. I like everything you're saying.
And he's been amazing. So in the last 6 weeks, we've moved my shoulder to a point where I'm pain free. I've got greater range of mobility also in my hinge pattern. We've corrected a couple of things in my conventional dead, which I never even used to do, but he's now got me doing them. And I'm actually feeling glute DOMs, which I haven't felt in over a decade. So this is pretty cool. And I'm now super excited, right? But Nick, please tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you got into this, because you
welcome to the show, Nick.
Passionate as hell.
How do I live up to that introduction like that? Oh, wow. Let's play that theme song again, eh? Like, yeah, thanks, Ali. Obviously, I guess we've sort of probably been floating around the industry for quite some time, the pair of us, and probably just passing ships, like, and the biggest thing for me is like whenever an athlete comes in and works with me, I just want to, like, I'm in the space that I'm in the industry of helping people, and it doesn't mean I have an idea or understanding until the person walks in front of me that I know what we're going to do or how we're going to do it. I just have this, approach that I just like to first try and understand what the athlete's experienced to the point that they're in front of me, and perhaps some of the decision making that they've had up to that point, and how that sort of shaped their careers, how that shaped the current situation, and that's all information that we can use as like building blocks of identifying why we're in the position we're in. And I sort of, Ali, I've spoke to you, but I guess the decisions of the past shape what the body looks like, and for most people, the body is slowly whispering and telling us things over time. It's until it screams often is that when the athletes go, hey, something's wrong here, we need to do something about it. So for me, I look at the program design, I go, okay, what's the program telling me about where the athlete's been for a considerable period of time? And I can go one way about it, or I can go the other way, which is I can look at the body. And there's two types of injuries, the one you've had and the one you're about to have. And yes. By looking at the body, we can identify the one that you're about to have. And also by looking at the body, we can also, unconsciously begin to develop an understanding as the ones you've just had, or the ones that have sort of been creeping up on you and you're not really aware. But what tends to happen is, particularly in the bodybuilding space, is because my niche has sort of been in that space of, I guess, bodybuilding now, it sort of came from the sporting environment first. And when you got athletes that are running multi-directional sports, they're colliding with other human beings, there's a few more concerns in regards to how the bodies are going to sort of tolerate the stresses that those sports involve. Bodybuilding, it's really quite simple. I think it's less strenuous, obviously. It's far more predictable. It's not as if someone's pushing you over in the squat rack or under a leg press or anything like that. So that the aspects of the approach are really predictable. Now, the challenge is this paradigm within bodybuilding that people often kind of gloss over, which is, I guess, injuries are just a part of the sport. It's just, being muscle bound, and this happens and that happens and aches happen. You see the typical old school bodybuilder has elbow sleeves, knee sleeves, bouts, and that's, I've been training for 30 years and that's just how I keep my body together, right? Whereas with bodybuilding in particular, I've started to begin to help others recognize that because it's so predictable, there's actually no excuse for injuries. And if you understand the balance of training and how to balance the body through the decisions you're making, it's actually really, not only will it slingshot you further from an athletic potential perspective, because what tends to happen is the changes to the joint happen over time through what you choose to do or how you choose to do it with your program design. you could be enhancing or potentially limiting your potential from a hypertrophy perspective. I take the shoulder, for instance, as obviously the shoulder is a dynamic joint in the sense of its ball and socket. It requires range, and then it requires stability within that range. Now, if you consciously look at the way that most bodybuilders prescribe exercise for, the shoulder in general, you'll see that there's a far dominant approach towards the horizontal pushing muscles and the vertical pushing muscles. So such as things that like the chest press or the bench press, chest machines, chest flies. And then we've got an anterior society that's already, relatively kyphotic in this position. Yeah. The females love their lateral raises, their shoulder presses and everything else like that to kind of get that capped out. And then we have an inability to be able to stabilize the scapula and downward rotation and retraction. Now, there's also a big emphasis. I had this conversation the other day, which is there's all that conversation about the V-taper and we need to develop the lats. And then there's a lost concept, which is, well, the lower traps also contribute to downward rotation of the scapula. So it's like...
Did you look at my report or something? I swear to God, he probably saw everything that's fucked up with my body. He's talking about the substrap, the lower traps, talking about literally all the shit that I have going on. So sorry, Nick, to interrupt you. You're speaking about me right now.
The crazy thing about that, and so we began to understand balance of training. We look at the priorities with what most people have done. There's a favoring to the front of the body, to the pressing muscles, to the overhead muscles, etc. But then you look at physical therapy that's being done, and most people will lie face down and have their head in a hole, rubbing the posterior. Now, if you're shortening the muscles of the front chronically through your training, but you're lying face down, releasing the posterior, you're beginning to understand there's a lack of balance to the decisions from a therapy perspective. Now, if you go into most massage therapists, they'll sort of rub between the shoulder blades and reduce tension through those areas, and they'll say it's tight or it's sore. Now, if the humerus is already being pulled internally through not only your life, and let's be honest, most bodybuilders are online coaches, so they spend the majority of their life on a laptop, and then they go on in the physical therapy, and they're now looking like this because of the physical therapy as well as everything else. So there's components of our decision making from a training perspective, from a therapy perspective, then also coincidentally from what we do in daily life and how we operate, that's having a vast impact on how we actually look physically. And until athletes and coaches take a bit of onus on why I'm in the position, rather than, I'm off to do rehab for another 8 weeks and we're back into a prep, it's like, no. What you're doing is you're not actually getting better in the periods that you're going back into prep. You're actually just either delaying or you're enhancing the potential for another injury to occur, because the therapy and the way that the rehabilitation practices generally work is they're rehabilitating you, and then you're going back to the effed up program that got you in that position in the first place.
The thing that fucking broke you, right?
Okay, we can't swear.
The same patterns, right? It just makes sense. Insanity of ourselves. It's so true. Gosh.
So it's the loop. And I say it's a loop of shit, which is the shit therapy gets you back to shit training, the shit training gets you back to shit therapy. And it's like most athletes will stay in that, and they perceive in the times that they're not experiencing pain or discomfort that they're actually improving. Now, I sort of have a theory, and this was developed through my studies under Ian King, which is disfunction, discomfort, pain, surgery. And what most athletes do is the period of that dysfunction is the longest durated period. So it's like slowly the athletes might be getting some direct adaptations. They might be getting bigger muscles. They might be getting faster. They might be getting stronger, but they're actually declining physically. Their bodies are actually slowly decaying. And in that process, they think that they're getting bigger and they're growing. And then all of a sudden injury hits and they go, oh shit, I've got to go back to the rehab. And then they go, or they deload or go away from the things that are causing the stimulus to occur. And they prioritize different things for that short period of time. They go, oh, no, I'm out of pain now. I'll go back to what I was doing, which is to grow those muscles. So that's the loop. And there's some cases that I can share that, in terms of how we've looked at changing that loop. But yeah, it's like, I'll give you an example. 212 competitor Aaron Pilates had no chest in the 2019 Olympia. And that was, his area that the judges told him to work on. At the same time, he couldn't do a single push-up in my living room because of the shoulder pain he was experiencing. So when the subacromial space closes over time and you've got so much internal rotation in the shoulder, and this is a guy that couldn't hang on to a flat bar because of the lack of external rotation he had in the arm, but yet his physical therapy was receiving, he was lying face down, releasing the external rotators of the shoulder, the back, So we had some really quick adaptations where immediately just from releasing the internal rotators, and doing a little bit of posterior chain, he could all of a sudden go train press without that symptom. So immediately is when someone gets off the table, I want to hear the feedback. Oh yeah, that does feel a bit better. Or, hey, that actually, I feel a bit lighter. And those are the common questions I have. Ellie was like, how
That
does
would
it feel?
definitely be mine. Mine is I feel lighter, I feel a little looser, but I feel freer too. Like I had more movement in my hips, in my gait when I would walk, but then I felt lighter all through that shoulder range and just through that whole upper quadrant on this side was just so intensely tight. Steph, I can't even describe to you, babe, but I was waking up multiple times throughout the night because I just had chronic pain, but it was radiating down into underneath my breast and into my rib
through the
cage.
chest.
And so the first thing Nick did to me was get up on the table, lady, and he had me. I went to go face down. He goes, no, other way up. And so I was.
Yeah, you need to actually hit more of the chest and neck, right?
Yeah, it got in all the very top and around that whole anterior delt, and then my whole capsule from front to back got done.
Allie, you're just talking about what I go through every week.
Yeah,
I'm like, seriously, that's what they have. Like, honestly, what you've hit right there on, and I cannot stress anyone that's listening to this and is maybe undergoing that loop that he just mentioned. You're just constantly going back into training, going to do some rehab work, and you think you're doing something. Like that was me. I thought I was doing something when I was going to rehab. And this is even 5 years ago. I would go to rehab, I'd do my therapy sessions, but I would still feel off, but prep was more important. Prep was more, the deadlines were more important. Me actually having to diet down and get to what I needed to do was more important to me at the time. So I would neglect those signs and the red flags. And I would truly just kind of think that they weren't going to cause me more pain. Cause I'm like, I'm not going to let it get to that point, right? Like you think that until you actually get injured, like truly get injured, you think that you can prevent it. And in reality, he nailed it. Like it's so accumulative that over time, all you're really doing is delaying all of you finding what the actual root of the problem is.
Delaying the actual fix.
Yes.
Right? That's all you're
delaying your fixing. Yeah, finding how to fix it. And I think that all this shoulder health is probably one of the bigger, precursors to a lot of our issues. Same with hips, right? I'm sure you deal with so many hip, balances, shoulder imbalances, internally stuck, externally stuck, whatever that anatomy of that body is. So I think the bigger takeaway here is the fact that you actually have to figure out what are your true imbalances, not just from a strength perspective. And that's the way I used to look at it. I'm not strong on this side, so let's fix it, right? Let's try to balance out my right to left. And all I was really doing is causing actually more damage to my actual injuries that I already had. So my imbalances got worse. Actually, even within the last 5 years, even though I was training to aesthetically look my best, I would actually put myself in an upside down position where now dysfunction was the biggest, longest period of time that I spent. And that dysfunction was me not really paying attention to scapular health. I did shoulder health stuff. Like, we do rotator cuff stuff. Like, you think that you're priming your joints. And I put up my quotations here because we think we're priming our joints. But in reality, all we're doing is increasing blood flow a little bit. We're not really getting that trigger release. We're not actually having something addressing maybe that stuck joint because of your range being limited. And you just kind of think, oh no, that's my limitation. That's for my body. There's so many times I'd be like, no, that's just as far as my body goes. It's just as far, like there's no way I can open up further on that way. So I'm going to stop there. And you still feel stimulus, right? You still train your muscle. So you feel good when you're training until you feel pain. And this is me over the last year and a half. Everyone, you guys already hear on the podcast, over the last 2 years, it's been a shit show of injuries where from my stress fracture in my foot to going up to my hip, going up through my low back to my shoulder, up my neck to where last year was my breaking point in my neck pain, where I'm like, fuck this. I'm so tired of this pain. I can't sleep. Like the sleeping just got so bad.
That's when
so my tension. Yeah, I just couldn't. I just felt like I had a creak in my neck, like at all times. So that sleeping being interrupted is what led me into, no, I have to figure this out. I really got to decompress the body. I've got to really figure out what is causing these tight muscles to stay overly active, because essentially at the end of the day, it's like your dominant muscles are going to take over no matter what you do. If you have stronger muscles, they're going to start, taking the load. So myself being at a desk over the last year, I have focused a lot more on my business, and being at the desk, I have noticed that's actually the position that causes me more pain because I'm actually rolling my shoulders forward. And what he brought, to surface here is the fact that our society is living in this hunched position. And here we go training, and we
flexes are locked on. Hip flexes are locked on. You're in this total rotation.
We're a mess. Like as bodybuilders, if we're bodybuilding, we're
touching on the hip flexors being locked in the seated position for predominant society. It's like
that's the biggest problem, right?
Look at the predominant prescription of exercises in the lower body continuum. Say, for instance, you look at most strength programs, the first exercise you'll see featured is a squat or an exercise that's of quad dominance. So what I perceive as being quad dominant, anything that's with a vertical trunk or more than 45 degrees vertical trunk. So for instance, a lunge, a leg press, a hack squat, a barbell back squat, and then a Bulgarian's on a continuum. A lot of people will try and lean forward, they get the lean and they say it's partially, but ultimately the immediate shortening of the hip flexor and the quad is primary. Now, further on that track is if you've got an anteriorly rotated pelvis where the hip flexors are already shortened, distally, you're putting the hip in a position that you're anteriorly rotating the point you want the most force production, which is then going to shorten the quads even further. So maintaining the pelvic position where it's posteriorly rotated, if you haven't got enough, and this is something that I touched on with Ali's programming, was the avoidance of doing hinge-based work over time. It then created an issue in itself. So she said, I haven't been able to have access to these particular exercises. Like, no, we haven't taken an approach that's allowed you to have access. So it's like, if you've prescribed, say, for instance, I think we assessed like 16 quad dominant exercises, I think. And it
was actually exactly as you just described. It was like squat and then hack and then Bulgarian.
That's no criticism either, because the reality is what you were dealing with was a perception that you can't go into any trunk flexion, you can't lean forward, you can't do anything because it's a perceived issue. Now, what I look at that as is rather than fundamentally looking at like, okay, we can't do a deadlift. Okay, we can't do multi-joint complex movements which are in a hinge pattern. Now, what we need to identify is you've currently got an issue with hip extension, because stabilizing the pelvis right now, you begin to anteriorly rotate. And that's what's then exacerbating the issues in the lumbar spine, and you're getting some compensation. And then when you do go into, say, some partially multi-joint exercises, you start to then get involvement of the quadriceps and stuff. And the teachings of, we've looked at your deadlift pattern, the way that you've prioritized your deadlifting over the years, and that's been a more vertical trunk position, more powerlifting based, which is chest up, ass down, lift as much as you can. The bar's away from the center of mass and it sort of loops up. So obviously we've taught you, or slowly began to integrate, the more hip dominant where the shoulders are over the bar and you're slowly bringing the hips through to the bar. But ultimately what we had to do, or what we have to do, is reverse periodize and basically reverse program your past training. And what that looks like is slowly integrating more things which begin to progressively add things which begin to reverse that pelvic position. Now, look at our positions that we're all seated in right now. It's like, if we're here for 6 to 8 hours a day, the first exercise we go and implement is a squat pattern. What are we re-emphasizing? The same thing we're doing immediately on the daily basis, right? And then you look at the sort of exercise prescription. If you look at most bodybuilding programs for the lower body, you'll see, particularly for men, you'll see a squat of some sort, a leg press, a hack squat or something. You'll see a lunge variation, a leg extension. You might see a single joint leg curl for the posterior, which does nothing for the pelvis. Then you'll see some calves, and maybe if they perceive their lower back to be safe to do so, an RDL. So you've got 3 to 4 multi-joint quad dominant exercises with high load potential versus one single joint exercise, say for the posterior chain and the RDL, if it's even integrated at all, trying to reverse all the costs. And these guys are laborers, chippies, people who work physical intense jobs, or they're truck drivers sitting in seats. And let's be honest, most bodybuilders are up and coming amateur bodybuilders aren't doing this professionally, or it's not their only income. And if so they're doing these labor intensive jobs, and they're coming into the strength environment and recreating the same imbalances that their daily lives already create, So we have to kind of consider that. And what I'm saying and what I'm getting at is, this isn't to try and rehabilitate the athlete. This is actually enhancing the athlete's potential, because whilst these issues exist, there is no performance enhancement. if you want to make the athlete better, you've got to fix this shit before you make them better. And if you don't, then you're going to be fixing the shit later. It's like two types of pain, the one you choose and the one that's forced upon you at some point. And that's the reality for most people.
Oh yeah. Oh, gosh, he's preaching. I feel like I just right now I'm being like, yes, sir. You are so right. Like this, absolutely. Everybody must be taking notes because at the end of the day, what you need to do is find out what those patterns that you repeatedly do. I do find that I've caught so many things in my day to day that I knew I was doing, but I wasn't paying attention to, like sitting on one side of the hip while always standing, right? Like and constantly, leaning into that hip, maybe internal rotation of my leg crossing over, right? All the time, constantly having that one crossed over. And it feels good, but the other one can't do it. So I'm like trying to stretch and trying to open up my hip and trying to, create more balance between, in the pelvis. So I really love that he's touching on this hips and the whole pelvis area, because I find that probably most people's actual locked up issues, low back pain, right? Like what's the number one thing that people come to you for, right? Probably low back pain, shoulder pain, neck pain.
Yeah, funny you say that, because in men, I think it's probably shoulder. And if you look at it from a generic approach, what's the number one thing that men want to train predominantly? It's the chest, the muscles of the front. It's this. For chicks, a lot of it comes in the lower back, lumbar, and particularly for athletes involved in bodybuilding because of the posing and the way that sort of then adds another whole dynamic to that one. And this is the thing, if you were to look at a golfer, you'd say, okay, he rotates one way consistently. He's continually rotating. His body's going to have some direct adaptations. He's not using a left-handed club and rotating the other way. With athletes in bodybuilding, yous are all posing to one side consistently. So there's some direct adaptations because of that. And say, for instance, you're doing that 5 to 10 hours a week, you're trying to perfect that. And then in your comp season, I was going to touch on what you said earlier, like when you're in comp prep, I think you were saying something about like you're doing all these things and what can happen is athletes will kind of, I was talking to Hattie Boydell about this, is about the fact that we kind of mask these issues in prep, because what athletes will do, and you'll see this at the greater level, say LeBron James, for instance, how many things does LeBron James do in a week to make sure he can play on the weekend? Probably hundreds of things. He's got that many staff, that many people looking after him. The general public, the general user will look at that and go, I need to do ice baths, or I need to go do a sauna, or, they're looking at the one thing that he goes and posts about, or the one thing that he's paid to sit in or something, and they go, that's the thing I need to do, rather than identify the other 98 things that he's doing that might have a greater insight or impact on his body being prepared to do the thing that is actually most important. So I think what happens is in prep, because you kind of just throw everything at that period, you kind of get away with a bit of shit more than what you usually would. Whereas when athletes are in their off season, they're like, we relax that sort of stuff a little bit. We're not getting as regular treatments. We're not doing those types of things. You kind of tension your body starts to elevate. The imbalances in the training kind of get magnified, because you're playing this risk versus reward and you're just risking it all the time. So it's like you kind of don't get away with it. And then people going, I'm trying to build, but I'm fucking keep getting broken. And it's like, it's because in the in season, you're doing the same shit, but you're just magnifying all the other shit that you do to kind of cover up the mess,
Exactly. And that's actually what I'm dealing with now. It's like for probably the last, let's say 7 years, I was already competitively trying to stay pretty relatively within a striking distance, right? It wasn't ever like this massive off season or anything. But for the last 2 years, I'm like, F this. I need to actually get my body in an actual place of stability, like actual recovery, and trying to, realign. And what you said earlier was undoing the work that we've done on ourselves, right? Retraining or learning how to retrain and programming to have function with different patterns. I think that's like probably for me the biggest challenge I'm having now, because as an athlete, you learn how to lift a certain way, and you favor that pattern over and over again. And so learning techniques that are going to go opposite of that pattern. Maybe if I was so fast in my concentric, now it's like, going slower in the concentric side, and focusing, maybe exploding more on the eccentric one. That was always what I focused on, which was the eccentric side, so trying to understand what my range of my joints and kind of what is not aligned properly. I think that's another big aha moment for me. alignments aren't going to align you. Like, yes and no, like, and please, I'm not trying to like say alignments are shit. It just means that one alignment's not going to fix you, but learning how your joints are actually supposed to be aligned within your body every single day for you to feel properly, like well, and not like lopsided and pretzel wise like I used to feel literally days on end. I'm like, let me just get aligned, and I would think that was a solution when in reality it was just muscularity that was not aligned. Like my muscles weren't aligned, my joints weren't aligned, and they would just go back into that position because I wasn't doing the corrective exercises, I wasn't doing scapular health, I wasn't doing hip mobility drills, all those things that really actually align your body, and you can just self-align by doing.
It's such a great point. And I think on that topic, it's a really good point to make is your strength training is your injury prevention work. It's not like you've got your injury. This is where the industry separates. Like I'm doing my rehab stuff and then I'm doing my training. It should be all one thing. And I think this is what Ali was sort of like talking about earlier, which is the industry kind of takes these two things and makes them separate. Like, oh, I'm doing the stuff that makes me able to do this stuff. It's like, this needs to be the same thing, and in order to make the strength program your actual injury prevention thing, so it's not, I think there's this perception that, and I get this a lot when people come and see me, it's like, oh, so will I still grow doing this? I'm like, yes, you certainly will, like better. You will
like in all honesty,
and I kind of have to convince them. I'm like, no, you will. Just trust me.
Like, I don't even question that at all. Like, not at all, because if you go through it, you'll be like, whoa, fuck, man, I'm feeling DOMs in places that I can't even begin to describe. And there's absolutely no question mark for me on the growth side of things. I think people only challenge it because instead of doing quintessential programming of say 4 to 5 sets of say 4 exercises only, in next, depending upon what your issue is and who you are, I guess, like if we use mine as an example, I've got maybe 7 or 8 exercises, but I might only be doing 2 sets, right? And there might be some sets that are more hypertrophic and some that are a little bit more in that 6 to 8 range. So he's got me structured in a way though, where the selection and order for me is what was really interesting, because it's kind of on the head of what I used to do, which is cool because that's in line with exactly what he was saying to me when I very first saw him. And the one thing I will say is, oh my God, Steph, I've never motherfucking stretched so much in my entire goddamn life. Every single day, single day, it is like stretch.
I'm gonna be like, Ali.
It's intense. It's like I literally have to say to myself, like, I like the fact that it's no bullshit junk volume though. So it might seem like you're doing a lot, but there's no junk in it. So let's just caveat that straight away. But I'm cool with doing the stretching and the foam rolling and the control drill, because I feel by the time I get to those working sets, man, I'm working and they're good and I feel good and they're
working what you're supposed to be working.
Exactly. And I'm getting DOMs in the places that we physically need for my body development zones where we're trying to recover mass. And I feel, not only do I feel confident we'll recover it, I feel like we're going to genuinely make me better than I was last time, because I'm actually going to grow my posterior chain in a way that I've probably not quite had access to. So it's been a really cool exercise so far.
I'm stretching.
Enjoying the journey.
Talk about the acceptance of stretching in the industry, because it's something that's obviously challenging.
I really actually wanted to touch base that right now, right? When I was like letting her, wrap up, I think that the stretching part is so over seen that people just do it just to like, oh, I'm going to do a quick dynamic warm up. I'm going to do a, cool down, or I'm just going to do like maybe once a week stretching. And I find that the stretching side has actually been what has helped me improve to get the range for the therapist and massage therapist to get deep into the joint, to be able to even honestly get deeper layers that were needing attention, that before it was like, well, you can't get there because of how tight the fascia and the layers are at the top. So I think that the stretching, just day to day, you're actually servicing your rehab therapy if you are doing some work already. If not, then you're really going to be just priming your joints. You're going to increase your range of motion. You're going to be able to load the muscle so much better. I find that the stretching side for me was always thinking that you should be flexible. And I'm like, oh, this is as far as my legs are going to stretch. I'm never going to be able to do the splits. And I was okay with that. I'm not trying to make that my goal. But then I realized, man, well, no wonder my adductors are limited. I can't ever really put them through that full range. And I'm not trying and me not trying to lengthen from
you
my
should have
pelvis
seen me
to
in the adductor stretch the first day. He's like, so Ali,
the ones that I suck at. I suck
he
at
gets me
adductor
through
stretches
all
and
these, and then he goes, "Can I do this one?" And the funny thing is, and I laughed about this because, like, holy shit, dude, when I was in uni, I used to lay watching the television in the splits with my hands on
screw
my.
you. I've never been able to do the splits.
I used to do that. I have not had access to that in a very long time. But like you just said, it's not that we can't do it. It's just we're not supple enough. We haven't been for a long time because we've just been constantly, chronically putting
I
ourselves
would show you guys. I just don't have a lot of right here.
it's intense.
I would show him.
He's in the position, right? And he's like leaning right forward, and he goes, and then you got to lean right through here, and then lean some more. And then his favorite thing with me is more. He uses that word so much. Some more, moreover. And I'm like, bro, this is as good as it gets. And I'm like this, and my head is here. And I'm like, it's not going anywhere near the goddamn ground.
That means that you're tight, Ali. That means that you need some work. We got a lot of work.
I think the biggest thing with that whole paradigm is that 20 years ago, no one used to give a fuck if someone was lying in the corner doing stretching. Now it's because everyone's got a voice on social media. Everyone's obviously a coach, and it's like, don't waste your time doing that. Like, if someone wants to stretch and they'd spend their time stretching and they get up and like no one's ever done a decent amount of stretching and gone, oh, fuck, I feel terrible after doing that. But there's this perception that it's like, oh, it's such a waste of time. It's like, again, back to like LeBron James sort of reference. It's like if LeBron James is doing stretching and he's doing all these other things, it's getting looked at. The problem is with the industry is we're looking at things that we can sell in order to make money from. It's pretty hard to make money from telling someone to go stretch for an hour and there's not too many people that want to join me on that in regards to going and doing that, right? So there's this sort of like resistance to doing something that it's incredibly boring for a lot of people. It doesn't require commercial equipment, so there's nothing you can sell in order for someone to go do it. I mean, they've created those Van Dams where you wind yourself out, you sit in the adductor and this one, but beyond that, it's like there's nothing really commercially viable for people to go. And so what's the incentivized reason for studies and scientific literature to go sell you or go promote the use of these things? I know I'm going down another whole rabbit hole with that topic, but the reality is if you don't create the space in the joint before loading, you're going to gradually wear and begin to wear down and deteriorate the joint health over time. It's like we've moved so far in the opposite direction as to, I guess, from a scientific community, looking at things as being like, well, if it doesn't, and let's look at the study that references stretching or static stretching prior to loading as having a negative relationship. If you actually objectively analyze the information that's actually being talked about or discussed, is you're taking an individual from a training environment perspective, you're lying him down on the ground, then you're going and telling him immediately after to do a maximal effort in a resistance-based exercise. When does that apply practically in any athletic environment? Never. When does the athlete go from lying down, relaxed, nice and, listening to Enya play and completely relaxed, right, to then jumping up immediately and going under a barbell and doing a squat? Or when do you see Usain Bolt get to the track and field and his warm-up is like a steam engine. It's progressive. It gradually builds up. It might take him 45 minutes to run 19 seconds, right? So it's like with bodybuilders, it's like, no, don't go stretch against the wall and lengthen your pec because then you're going to go under the bench press immediately after. Whereas what if we take the athlete, we progressively increase the joint temperature, so they might spend a little bit of time, whether it's on the treadmill or on the bike, then they go and with that increased joint temperature, go and passively open the range within the joints. Then they go do some control work. Then they get their, readiness to train or their feelings of, can't think of the word, to basically go under the bar or do the activity immediately after. It's not as if we're going from stretch to train. It's like there's a progression to doing those things. And that's where the industry is kind of lost is rather than looking at one thing in such isolation, we're not looking as to how to prepare the athlete for the actual overall preparation of the grander thing that's going on. It's just like we're so caught up in this is the only way to do things rather than being like, well, objectively, if the athlete goes and lengthens their pecs, gradually then increases their proprioception or awareness around how their scapula sits and the way it's positioned, then go do some retraction-based work, get the shoulder sitting in a healthier position, then go into loading. Objectively listen to that rationalization and think, how is that bad? How is it?
sense?
Yeah.
Like, that's all I wanted to say. How does that not literally make the most common sense? I think that's what it is, like, neglected when it comes down to priming your body, if we want to call it that. It's not even a warm up as much as it's just priming yourself. And for myself, that's actually what my whole life has really been around for the last year, is figuring out what priming mobility drills I have to do to actually set myself up to be able to load the body. And that's how I ended up figuring out, well, I can't load this way. Okay, I can't load that way. But I was able to then position myself where I can do something and figure out what I could do, rather than keep saying, I can't do this, I can't do that. I was figuring out things that I could do because I was priming myself to make sure my joints were aligned. And that wasn't through alignment. And that's why I was making that comment. It was more about me doing drills, like, again, trying to sit my scapula back into position, trying to make sure my thoracic spine was equally open on both sides, that I can have good range, that my hips weren't stuck, so having internal and external rotation. Same with my ankles. I think a lot of people don't really realize that their ankles are pretty, like, just stuck, especially when you're going to go into loading and having some weight bearing on your feet, which is why I'm very specific on this ever since the foot injury. Like, you just have to have a little bit more stability through the full plane of your foot. And I think that that's another thing that we just see, and we don't really focus on the full balance of using your big toe. Like, the fact that I wasn't using my big toe to its max potential actually led to me to have some of these injuries. So here comes another thing, right? Like, a big toe not being able to push off the toe. I'm like, why isn't my big toe not wanting to, like, activate it? It started cramping, and I'll never forget that cramp. It was a holy hell. It was like one of the worst cramps I think I've had. It was worse than the pinky. And that's when it dawned on me. I'm like, holy shit, my adductor, it went all internally into my hip. And I'm like, oh God, that was my big toe that did that. And all because I wasn't actually pushing. And, you're using it to stabilize, but you're not using it as a muscle to actually help you propel and push forward. And that right there was like one of the bigger aha.
Everything you just said, if you're in a session here with Nick, it'd be like midfoot, full foot, midfoot.
Oh yeah,
not in your fucking heels.
That'd
literally be the conversation.
Every lift now, Stephanie, push through the big foot, or even with my scapula, because I've had a lot of my issues on my right side. I just a quick little even update, having him on here, I think is just so enlightening. Like, the fact that our nervous system and our muscular system are working together, right? And the fact that our nerves can get pinched if we start neglecting some of these overused muscles that we're training, and which was kind of what was going on with me. And I was just neglecting some of that numbing or some of that actual little pain I was kind of getting. So if you do have any of those sensations, whether if that is numbing, tingling, something is just not firing, it just does not feel balanced. These are all things as to why you probably need to be seeing a Nick or somebody that works in his field to correct yourself and go figure shit out and stop trying to just work through it. So I hope that this is kind of like a little bit more of a much better, enlightening, I guess, episode for everyone that normally is a little different than what me and Ali actually kind of took base on.
And I thought it would be pretty cool to bring up, because I know there's so many people currently in prep and not in prep mode and full steam ahead towards stages, and they may or may not be experiencing some of the things we've already talked about, and doing the masking and prioritizing what matters most and risk reward component right now. But this would be really great for you to start prioritizing and thinking about coming out the other side.
Rehab.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone who's in an off season like me, the biggest thing I'm doing is now getting really conscious about movement. I'm getting really conscious about mobility and range, and I'm getting, I'm just very open to rewinding and correcting elements from the past, right? So, God only knows where I would be if I had Nick fucking 5 years ago. But anyway, I got him now, so that's all that matters. And he's like my little ace up my sleeve, ladies and gentlemen.
He's pretty much told us, like, if you have crap periodization, if you don't have good exercise selection, if you have a lack of individualization, right? Like, knowing that if you have more dominant areas, like he was bringing up the bodybuilder having to bring up a chest, and pecs, and that was an area of focus, but he really couldn't. So if you're having maybe a sport like bodybuilding forcing you to fit in the mold, but you lack some of this variety and lack, being able to have that functionality within your body, I think that this is something that it's a big message for you. Like, this is definitely an episode meant specifically for you guys. So the takeaways for me is making sure that you do prime your body, that you aren't waiting till you get injured, right? Like, making sure that you actually address things beforehand and start actually looking at inside of your program, because that's actually where the issues lie. They do come from the over repeated exercises we constantly do, and maybe, restructuring that. I think that's probably where I'm going to be reassessing myself. Oh, yeah, I'm going to be definitely doing that, and probably reaching out here too.
It definitely even made me think about when I'm programming for clients. I went to a whole nother level with them after seeing Nick. I was like, whoa, okay, fuck, I need to start thinking about this to this level with anyone that pops up with anything that's a potential, niggle. Because
the thing that you do first is the thing that you do best. And it's like, if you've done something for an extended period of time and you haven't reversed it within the sequence of the program. So say, for instance, like you have had that prioritization on a Monday or Tuesday where you've had quads featuring at the start of the week, the start of the workout. We've got squat, or squat pattern followed by press. And that's featured predominantly for the start of the week for quite some time. And there hasn't been the reversal of that. Your prioritization by sequence is basically posturally causing concern over time. And I go back to the topic about Aaron earlier, obviously 212 competitor, competed at the Olympia. I said to him, mate, you're about 70% of your potential. He goes, you lost it. He goes, 70%. He goes, that got me top 10 in the world, and I go, yes, but hang on. The prioritization over what you've done over a sustained period of time has actually created a deep hypertrophyizing of your body because of the fact you've so internally rotated now. You cannot grow your chest, and that's your lagging point. So we had to go away from we took out any horizontal pushing for nearly 3 to 6 months. And he had people coming up to him at the gym when he was PTing clients going, fuck, have you been what's going on with your chest? Your chest is looking
big. Growing.
Because all of a sudden the space had started opening up. So the contraction, really about to get the contraction started to change. And he goes, I've never, and progressively over time, we reverse sequenced the program. We didn't bring the chest training back into the front of the week. We brought it into the back of the week, and prioritization wise, it was down the end of the workout. Progressively, we slowly incorporated variables back in that over time. Not only was he getting away with being able to train his chest again, he wasn't getting the symptom, because the fixing of the program design, the method, the way we prioritize it was the thing that changed the position of the shoulder joint. The integration of the chest training back in was then the thing that was enabling him to not only get the chest to start to grow again, but also do it with far less volume. It's like the guys that train, or girls included, how many 101 different fucking glute exercises do you need to try and grow your glute max? It's like, and they'll do it from different angles and the other thing is like, we've got that many of those exercises being perceived glute exercises when there's so much quad involvement, there's so much other things. It's like, if we found our foundation was brought upon, okay, we need to prioritize hip extension. And in order to do that, we have to stabilize the pelvis. If there's other things going on and there's lumbar extension, every time you go into hip extension, you get that lumbar extension and then you're unable to stabilize, you've got to look at where those weak links are coming and why. And is it through the program design has actually caused the downregulation of your body and now you can't stabilize that joint? Or is it just shit program design in the first place and the actual perceived ideas of where that exercise targets is actually probably secondary? Look at the hip thrust, and I'm not going to bag the hip thrust out because I
was actually just about to ask your comment on it. I wanted to wait. I was like going to say, can we comment really quickly on your thoughts on the hip thrust, because you're going in that direction?
Okay, so the hip thrust is, let's be honest, it come from a rehabilitation world. It come from the physical therapists of the 1950s, 60s that developed an exercise where you lie on your back, supine, and you lift your ass off the ground. You start fucking from there, right? So the reality is over time, you're trying to gradually incorporate the ability to be able to stabilize the pelvis for the transverse abdominals and the glute max to lift the ass off the ground. The biggest thing involved in that is that there's partial knee extension in that movement. So if you've got someone who's already predisposed to anterior rotation where the pelvis is pulling forward, the lumbar starts to get, bit of curvature, and then you go into hip extension with that position, you're going to have some aggravation of the lumbar spine. Now, I don't care what anyone says about, oh, no, but I learned to brace, I'll do it like this, I tuck this, I do that. That's all secondary, because before you've even gone under the bar, there's already that fucking position that exists.
You're already doing that.
Load to that, you're magnifying an imbalance which already is currently present in the body. So go back before you even talk about how I do the exercise. You standing statically right now with that position, you've got lordotic position where the lumbar's in curvature and pressure in that lumbar. So you add load to that, you're only going to exacerbate that more. So it's like, if we don't reverse that as a priority first, and the athlete might not have the ability, I prescribe the single leg glute bridge a lot of the time in all my control exercises. but it's on the end of those exercises. It's not prioritized first. And reason being is that it does involve the quad. And if an athlete already has training history that involves a lot of quad training, they might have high tissue tone in the quadriceps, which is impacting their ability to be able to stabilize. So on a program design, this is where we look further down the rabbit hole of like, okay, well, not only in the exercise planning of the actual strength program, can they have to reduce the exposure to the quad work, they actually have to reduce their exposure to the quad work in the control exercises, because whilst we increase tension there, we're going to downregulate the ability to be able to stabilize joints elsewhere in the actual strength session itself. So it's like on a continuum, is the hip thrust one of the favorite exercises that I prescribe straight off the bat to an athlete as the king of glute exercises? No, because it involves more joints than just the main one, which involves hip extension, you know? So when the athlete's ability to be able to stabilize their pelvis is better, we can go down the rabbit hole a bit further and go, now we can implement this. And now the load potential that people were like, I hip thrust fucking 200 kilo, amazing. But how much is your quadriceps doing and how much is your hip extensors doing? Who fucking knows? So rather than thinking this is the bang for buck exercise, is just think, hey, maybe a little bit of rationalization behind why we're doing it. And rather than the industry paradigm being so popular, and I'll probably get some flack for this because I always have, and I don't care, because at the end of the day, the athlete is priority because of the fact that we have to look at objectively before we prescribe exercise, what is the outcome of doing that, rather than being like, I love hip thrust and I'm going to attach myself emotionally to the exercise I prescribe. It's like, you know,
exactly what it is though.
But that's what happens.
Exactly what it is.
It is. It's an emotional attachment. And I'm just going to put a quick, I guess, for my own self, because I find I'm on the same boat as you. I agree. I feel like there is a time and a place for a hip thrust, but not for, let's say, the heaviest load. There was never a time that I would lift heavy hip thrust that I would ever feel my glutes. I was always going to feel like my hip flexors, my hip flexors and my quads. Like if I lift, however many kilos for you guys, but like, let's say 300-400 pounds over here, I would literally always feel it just in my quads and in my hips. And ego got met, right? You're like, damn, I'm a badass. I hit this amount. That's cool and all if that's what your purpose is. But if you're really trying to hypertrophy the glutes and actually try to grow your glutes, I never used to use hip thrust as one of my go-to exercises. This was always like, and don't get me wrong, I prescribe hip thrust, but I don't give them as like the all-time god exercise, because squats, lunges, squats, lunges, and RDLs, any type of deadlift variation that's going to really actually engage the lengthening of the glute is going to really maximize the load much more. So again, this is just from a perspective that I agree with you, Nick. So even if we get the backlash, I mean, it's going to be a little bit to the team over here. I mean, Ali, I think relates because of her injuries. It never felt right for me, and even now when I do a hip thrust, it's very technical. I have to really do more of a cast, bridge, more a hip extension, keep it more symmetric, part, because the moment I'm at the bottom, I really feel my low back so much. It's funny because I just trained with Hattie on this week earlier when we were at the Raw and opening, and she loves hip thrust. I mean, she loves it so much that I was like, Hattie, my back probably is not going to be able to handle them. I said, but I'll give it a go. But her body type is so different. Like her anatomy is different. Her joints were so different than mine. And again, it came down to her positioning in the machine was perfect for her to activate her glutes, and it was not perfect for me. I was like, it's all good. Like we went through ranges. We went through the lengthened portion, probably getting us to get a little bit more DOMs rather than at the top. We were both so much stronger at that hip extension and the eccentric part. I mean, literally, I was trying to jump on the machine to push her down, and I couldn't push her down. And same thing. It's like, we're so strong at our hips, guys. Like we're so strong, essentially at the hip flexing portion. So I find that the glutes aren't getting the maximal load that they could be. So just noting on that.
And telling me the exact machine that I have to buy for my gym, the hip thrust machine, and I says, "Oh, is it going to be Flex Method sponsored? Is it?" But yeah, but I think
you loved it.
Is that like it's not that hip thrust. I'm demoting the use of a hip thrust. I'm saying that it's like it should and can be used. But don't look at it as it's like it is the foundation of glute exercises. It's just one of many exercises you can integrate in the prescription of training the glutes. And if it is a glute max exercise, which you're extending the hip with, there's so many of those other exercises which put you in a fully lengthened position first, such as a back extension, such as a GHD, such as an RDL, all those types of variations, good mornings, everything else, that maybe as a single joint exercise might be a pillar that then you can move to a more multi-joint exercise, such as a thrust, where there is a little bit more awareness needing to be developed around how the pelvis is sitting, how the knee and ankle, joints are being integrated into that. So I just think, like, rather than canceling it out, which has been in trouble in the past, I'd rather say that it has its place. And particularly, I've had to mold my perception around that, because obviously working more with bodybuilders, there is that look, like, you have to model and shape the way that you look at program design based on some of the athletes' feelings and association of feelings around particular things. And like what you said about Hattie as her biomechanics as well. And it's just like, rather than being like cancel culture, I think that's a bullshit way of looking at things. I think it's like, well, okay, well, if we're going to do that, we have to make sure we do this first, and we do these other things to make sure you're in a good spot to be able to do that. And then you can kind of, like, I've had this, like Tani, for instance, Sheehan, same sort of thing, really loves hip thrusting, really wants to do that, but she's had chronic back issues over the past. And I'm like, okay, we can do that, but guess what we're doing here? And that's going to, and it's sort of like that little bit of just like, I'll give you a little bit of this with all of that. So it sort of cancels and balances out the approach.
What you love to do can be done effectively if you just know that you're not having the imbalances occurring. Because obviously pain equals something's going on, red flag. Your body is screaming at you, don't neglect it. If there is something that is, zinging, I call it the zing, because I'm like, oh my God, I just felt a zing down my back. Like, it just like completely felt gnarly, like an actual like electrocution or something. But that's, again, because I have waited way too long. I've been in the, just dysfunction phase for too long. And this doesn't mean, it's funny, people will look at me, I go to a therapist, they'll look at me and they're like, you don't see it until you start moving and start doing certain things, because your body doesn't look wrong. Nothing looks wrong on your body until you show us these things that are not feeling right. So if you are just feeling off, I think this is just a very, very important thing to address. And I love that he's really touching base on some of the corrective exercises as well that could, potentially either make or break you. So trust can either make or break you. I really do believe that. I think there is a time and a place for it, but even if you have those imbalances, you're going to be feeling more pain on one side than the other. If you have like a herniated disc that has already happened, if you have a slipping disc anywhere in the spine, I mean, honestly, there's just so many things that we have to pay attention to. So slowing down, I think that's my biggest thing now. It's like not even lifting heavy. It's just honestly getting myself to go through just the range and really being mindful of how I feel and overall the stimulus on the muscle. Because at the end of the day, the muscle's not going to know you lifted 200 pounds, 100 kilos, where if it was 10 pounds, 10 kilos doesn't matter. It's really just knowing that it's going through stimulus, that you're putting it, under some tension. And that's really where my main focus is now, and not really trying to just put myself under a bar. I've actually not squatted and compressed my spine in over a year now. So that's pretty crazy just to think about.
Wow. I actually haven't done one for a while either.
Yeah. I mean, I probably tried. I think I did it just to add the barbell on my back, just the barbell itself. And I felt the numbing on my right side. So I'm like, I'm not.
I don't think I've done it since the first trimester. So that'd be almost a year. And to be fair, I don't think I would have had access to it with my range in my shoulder until Nick sorted me back here again.
So since we have him, and I actually think this is a good question that a lot of bodybuilders are actually going to be probably dealing with at some point in their journey, maybe some tendonitis, maybe, some actual elbow, knee pain. Like in these cases, Nick, besides obviously go get your shit worked on and make sure you address it, what's something that you would recommend, to actually have someone do maybe on their own that would help alleviate some of these things, or things that you would put your clients through?
Yeah, like just in general, just pain in general, or things that well, the biggest thing you've got to look at is like we've touched on, is like, okay, what is the foundation of, what is the thing that's caused the issue to exist in the first place? And for me, the first thing I look at is the program design, right? That's the first place for me to look at. Once you've moved beyond that and you go, okay, cool, I understand that I've got some imbalances within my training decisions. I've got to kick the can down the road a little bit more, and I need to understand how has my training decisions impacted the joint. okay, I understand, for instance, they look at the shoulder. Okay, I understand I've shortened this pec for so long and now it looks like this. It's like someone's just crunched their fist and my pecs are so short. Okay, how do we change that? Well, we get tissue work done on those areas and we change the relationship of that. So look at what your program, and this is one thing that Ian, who I studied under, is really great at doing, is basically look at your program as a quadrant for the upper body and a lower body continuum. So if you've got, say, for instance, a number of exercises on one side, which is, say, this is the horizontal pushing side. You've got bench press, incline press, chest fly, dips, whatever else, right? And then up here, you've got lateral raises, overhead shoulder press, front raises. And then on this side, you look at this side and you go, oh, I've got like a seated row that's close grip with momentum and I just swing it back and forth. And you're like, oh, I see an imbalance here. And you see the reason why the program looks imbalanced, and you look at the athlete's body and you're like, yeah, it makes sense. Then looking at the lower body, you go, okay, well, how many quad exercises have we got? Okay, there's a squat, a lunge, a leg press, a Bulgarian. Okay, this is all on the quad end of the continuum. Then you've got, oh, I've got one RDL. Okay, cool. There's an imbalance there. Let's fix that for a start. Then integrate how we have to do that safely without the athlete being exposed to being able to be like, well, I just can't do an RDL right now because it fucking hurts when I lean forward. Well, okay, what do we have to do to stabilize those joints? We look at the abdominal group. How much prioritization around the abs do we prioritize? How much prioritization around the glutes? Just in the isolation of being able to control that pelvis. Look at that. That's the primary place to start. Before you go get soft tissue work, before you go stretching and changing and doing all these other things, look at that as the foundation. Then once we've done that, let's go look at getting soft tissue work. If we took a map into the massage therapist and put that on the wall and you go, okay, I've done this here, and as a result, this is why this looks like this. Can you please release this and not fucking release that? Thanks. That's a good place to start, rather than go, oh, I'm sore in my back. I have no idea why. It's like, oh, well, just lie face down and I'll rub your fucking back. It's not going to fix the problem, right? So it's like identifying why the joints look the way they do and then going, okay, what do I do to change that? And then it's integrating the soft tissue work and the training as a I hate the word holistic because it's overused and fucking but it's a more holistic way of looking at how we integrate the training, the treatment, and then begin to look at actually long-term fixing the problem rather than just going, oh, I feel better after my treatment, back to the same old things again. So that's what we did at the start, which was the same sort of conversation, is fix the problem long-term rather than kind of find temporary solutions and mitigate the risk. Obviously, there's things that you can do. Like my top three would be, stretching. So change the length and tension of the tissue that surrounds the joint. Go get large amounts of soft tissue work, dry needling. You can do other things like cupping and acupuncture and stuff like that. I just think hands-on tissue work is the fastest way to change a joint. And as a therapist and practitioner, I find that it's the fastest way to get immediate understanding as to what tissue is doing what and why it's tight, rather than just going, we'll just put some cups on that and we'll see how you go in 10 minutes time. And I'll, it's like, I need to assess tension and physically feel tightness in the tissue. Then I can go about changing it. So I always think king of all things, and this is sort of goes back to the era of Charlie Francis and guys like that in the Canadian sprint coaches who just did therapy and hours and hours and hours of tissue work on their athletes. And that traditional sort of model where the Eastern European practitioners of the early 1900s, it's kind of lost its spark, because what people have now realized, if they go get a machine that just zaps the muscle, or they go just chuck some cups on it and needles, they can fuck off for 10 minutes and have a latte whilst the athlete sits there doing those things. So
with a little estom and stuff, electrodes.
And actually do something with it. So
they've got that to me, and I'm like looking at them like, you should be doing some manual therapy on me, but I'm too tough. They're like, your muscles are hard. They're like, your muscles are very tough. I'm like, oh gosh, here we go. So I completely agree with you. It's the lazy form, I guess.
I think massage done well with the areas that we just spoke about. If you look at most athletes in bodybuilding, you look at the upper trapeze tightness through the elevation of the scapula, look at the chest and the internal rotation, the internal rotators of the shoulder, then look at the hip flexors and the quad length, and then you look at around the surrounding hip muscles such as the adductors, the external rotators, and you begin to assess those things, you'll find out a lot about the athlete relatively quickly. As to what you need to prioritize to change the symptoms. If you treat most of those things, you're probably going to have a positive outcome. Whereas if you look at 9 times out of 10, what gets treated, between the rhomboids, you see the lower traps get reduced tension, you see the erectors get released, you see the glutes get released, the hamstrings get released, and lie on your back, we'll do 5 minutes on your quads and 5 minutes maybe on your chest. The imbalance of the therapy is what's causing the imbalances within the body as much as the training.
Preach, man. I love that. That was such a good wrap. And the way you really made that just simplified. Like, that's a really good way to just go back, take those notes, make sure you actually apply them and you actually try to stretch, because I think that's the biggest first thing on his list. Stretching, right? And that's actually what I'm going to do before the end of the night. But no, I love that. Nick, thank you so much. That was so insightful. That was so helpful. I really do feel like you spoke to me on so many levels and about my body on so many of like sentences you were saying. But I think most humans do have a lot of the same issues. At the end of the day, I'm sure you only have so many different planes of things that you have to work through certain individuals. And it's like, okay, but you're a worker that does this line of work. You're a bodybuilder, or, you're this on your feet all the time, or you tend to keep your hands above your head all the time working, like whatever that is. I'm sure that he's able to kind of find those patterns commonly across the board. So we're all pretty common as coaches. We sit at a desk, we train, we do the same things, right? We probably just do low impact stuff. So being able to kind of force your body to get out of those rhythms. I know I'm really navigating that in my journey right now and really trying to find different things that bring me joy that I know I can also do by correcting myself. So yeah, Ali, anything on your?
No, I think everyone that follows me is going to see a lot more of Nick, so stay tuned. He's going to be featured on all of my shit everywhere, and you will definitely be able to see, I think, the progress that we're making, which is really cool. Because it's one thing to just say that there's the program, but there's another thing to show it actually being executed and the final product. So I am super excited to see what we build over time, and super confident that we're going to make some pretty big
for you guys.
Yeah,
it's so needed. We all need a Nick. Honestly, we all need someone in our corner.
Bloody glad I got
look at a pattern. Right. Like, and it's no joke. Like, and like, do you do stuff online? Because this is a good way for you to, where can we find you?
Yes.
What's your handle? What's your information so we can all find you online?
Yeah, Coach Nick McCallum, just on Instagram. So if you just go through that, and then obviously there's links and stuff to making appointments and whatnot through that. But yeah, you'll find me there and probably on Ali's page to some degree. But
awesome.
Yeah, I think just like, thanks for having me. Like, obviously it's nice talking to athletes that have, I think speaking from experience, like athletes are just, the thing with coaches, there's so much conjecture around what is the best way, what is this, but when athletes are kind of just wanting to be the best, it doesn't really fucking matter what we do. It's like, we just want to be better. So it's like, it's nice talking to athletes in that space of like, rather than being attached to ideas or philosophies, it's just like, oh, that makes sense. And I think that's the common theme as to the conversations I like having with people, is like, not resistant to ideas. And if we all sat down and we had a rational conversation about it with all coaches, we'd probably find that we all come to some sort of commonality and conclusion. It's like, hey, that actually does have some sort of, common sense approach. And I think we've moved away from that. And I think as a industry and as a physical preparation service provider, I think that's the thing we have to come back to is what we're doing, is it putting the athlete's needs as priority, or is it just like, we're all following the blind, leading the retarded, and just doing the thing that, it seems to be what we're all doing. And if you look at most programs, you'll probably, and coaches and the way that we're looking at things, is it's a bit of that. It's where everyone's doing the same sort of thing, just with a different, slightly different tweak on it. And it's rather than looking objectively and going, okay, from doing this, what's the outcome? Okay, my athlete's in pain. What can we do about that? Well, clearly there's something within what I'm doing that's having a negative effect. Let's change it. And once we come from that position, it's not about, the coach got it wrong or he doesn't know, or that. It's just, no, we just learn from it. We just get better from it. And that, as an industry, that's, I think, the approach that we all should take. And rather than criticizing or being critical of certain methods or ideas, it's just like, hey, as an industry, we should be trying to advocate for the things that are kind of going to be helping. And when we do get a solution, let's talk about it. Why did it happen? Rather than being like, that's because of blah, blah, blah. It's just like, nah, let's just be open to ideas, and rather than criticize, maybe sit back and go, oh, that's interesting. I like that. Why has that happened? So I think that's space that I like to be in, and I like other people to be in as well.
I love that.
Yeah. I love the fact that we got you on. I'm absolutely confident that everyone listening to this took something out of it, if not many things. And, look, we will share Nick and his page across our channels as well. So stay tuned on that. I know Nick does provide prescriptive based programming for people anywhere that do need help with exercise order and selection. So if you do want to look at that and jump onto his bio, log a call with him. I really can't speak highly enough. He's been amazing, and I'm looking forward to what we do moving forward.
I love the movement. Honestly, I consider this a movement. Like, I feel like this is such an untouched thing recently. Like, it's been touched in the past, but it's been kind of, buried underneath the surface because of the bodybuilding world being so, on social media, it's just about the training. It's just about the dieting. It's just about, looking your leanest, showcasing, the highlight, and maybe not the boring work and the hard work. Hard work being this stuff. I feel like that really does encourage me to show that, because I really don't record it because I find it so boring. I'm like, I'm literally
you should.
at an inch. Like, I'm moving an inch. You know what I mean? I'm moving so slow that it means to me, I'm like, this is so unengaging. Like, this is definitely not something I
what most people need.
You're 100% right. It's definitely more so a movement. I just need to, like I said, I'm freaking
lean into it.
I'll lean into it, because I find like I'm not really training hard. Not training hard doesn't mean we're not training, guys. I just want to leave it with that, because I find that sometimes we get in our head and think that we're just not training enough. We're just not training hard enough. We're not doing enough. But if you're taking care of these small things and you're actually doing the hard stuff, this is the hard stuff. I know it is, but take it from me. This is way harder than training and getting under the bar. This is way harder than lifting heavy. This is way harder because it's mental. It's more about you actually going through the hard shit your body doesn't want to do. So it is hard. It's actually physically hard sometimes, not to do it, but to go through it, because I'm like, fuck, I can't do it. Damn it. Like, you get frustrated. And because I get so frustrated, I'll end up kind of getting down about not being able to train. So it's this cycle of you actually having to break through your day-to-day. I know I can do stuff. I just have to do it. And that's actually kind of what my motto is now. It's like, just move. Like, as long as I can just move and I can actually make sure I'm moving pain-free, I'm going to be happy. And then I can get back into in a building phase that I know will be more effective with actual no pain and actual gains, because that's the whole purpose here. We want to progress. We want to get better as athletes. And what you said, Nick, we're coaches, but me and Ali here, we're more athlete mentality, even though we are coaches. We want to be our best. We want to, obviously challenge ourselves to obviously, see how far we can go. Her as a mom, and inspirational, postpartum journey, whether if it's a competitor, mother, coach. I think it's just so important for both of us to truly dig in and go against the norm. I think this is kind of what we're talking about here. It's not the easy stuff. It's not the most talked about. It's not the most fun thing,
glamorous, right? But it's the most.
But it's the thing that we have to do. And I appreciate you touching base on that today, Nick, and just for your time. So make sure you follow him. And guys, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for listening to Ali and I. It was good to have this combo back. It's so good to see you, Ali. Let's make sure we don't take too long before we do this again.
Absolutely. We'll see you all soon. And thanks again, Nick. You're a gem.
Thanks, Nick.
See ya.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, babe. You get going. You go do what you got to do.
All right. I texted them. I told them I'm out. I said, okay, bye, guys. It's good to meet you, Nick.